Lesson 4, the fourth Yama, is Brahmacharya. Now if you read the handout, you see that it is very much focused on sexuality, but before we go into that, what does Brahmacharya mean? You see the first paragraph, that Brahma means harmony. But Brahma actually means God. And of course, if you understand this a little bit more, you realize that harmony and God is the same. Acharya means living the life of. Some years ago, when I had my yoga studio in Itaewon, the International Yoga Federation gave me the title of Yogacharya, Brahmacharya, Dharmacharya. Acharya means living the life of. Yogacharya is a person who devotes their life to yoga. A Brahmacharya means living a life devoted to, we call it God. But when you use the word God, many people feel resistance. Because we live in a world where the concept of God is explained wrongly. Many people think that God is something outside themselves, up there in the sky. And God will punish you if you do something wrong. It is a very long story if I'm going to explain it properly. But religion, as we know it, has nothing to do with how it started thousands of years ago. In fact, just like with yoga, modern yoga is the opposite of traditional yoga. Religion started the same as yoga started. People looking for answers. People trying to understand themselves, life, the environment, the universe. But religion has been abused by authorities to control people. So they instill fear into people to make them behave. And that's the opposite of the origin of yoga and the origin of religion. Religion is a heavy word now by people who are at least a little bit enlightened and can think for themselves. And that's correct. We feel resistance for the right reasons, because originally religion was to enlighten people, to allow people free thought, freedom of thought. Authorities, governments have turned it into a control tool. The Roman Empire, who killed Jesus Christ, didn't allow Christianity until the 4th century. Until the 4th century, they persecuted Christians. Why did they persecute Christians? Because Christians were rebels. They practiced true spirituality, so they were able to think. They were able to understand the devious ways of government, the darkness of government. So government doesn't like. Just like China is also persecuting spiritual groups. They want to keep people dumb. They want to keep people in the dark. Spirituality is the opposite. It's to enlighten people, to liberate people, to develop insight, freedom of thought, etc. So, just short. Brahma is God, but it is very important to understand what God means. Because in yoga, what God means is the crown chakra. There are people who say, in every person is a little bit of God. It's true. Because your divine qualities are located in the crown chakra. When there is energy in the crown chakra, you experience a condition that is called paradise. So, when people talk about God as being something outside, being some foreign entity somewhere up in the sky behind the clouds, stop listening to those people. They don't know what they're talking about. And many spiritual people do this. It's very simple. And if you understand it correctly, it's very valuable for you as a person to develop and to see the world, to understand the world and the people in it. Brahmacharya literally means a person who pursues spirituality, higher levels of consciousness, which occurs when there is energy in the crown chakra. Yoga, when done correctly, is a very systematic approach that leads to that condition where there is energy in the crown chakra. When you are devoted to practicing yoga, you are kind of a Brahmacharya, a Yogacharya or a Brahmacharya. So we are all Brahmacharyas if we take our yoga a little bit serious. Now, in many religious communities, men and women are strictly separated, and the leaders are not allowed to marry. A very clear example of this is, of course, the Catholic Church. Priests are not allowed to marry. They have to make a vow of celibacy, which means they vow to abstain from sex. Now, if you look at the system of yoga and you understand what you are looking at, you see that it is very systematic. We started talking about violence. Then we talked about lying. Then we talked about stealing. There is a very logical order. Brahmacharya, if you violate Brahmacharya, you violate non-violence, non-lying, and non-stealing. And that's why it is important to look at this from a perspective of sexuality. Because lots of relationships in which there is sexual connection or activity, there is violence, lying, and stealing involved. In most relationships there is. Because sexuality, if you look at it technically, is a means of survival, not only for human beings, but for animals. We feel a strong desire to have sex that is only designed to procreate so that our species survives. So technically, that is all that it is. But we are not animals anymore. We have learned to think. We have learned to act. And we experience strong desires, both men and women experience strong desires, including desire for sex, that if we react upon that desire instinctively, which most do, it leads to the violation of non-violence, non-lying, and non-stealing. Men, for example, often obtain sex using violence. Maybe not always physical violence, but pressure in some kind of way. Verbal pressure, maybe. Manipulation. Or women, maybe a little bit more subtle, will use sexuality to gain certain favors from their partner or from a man. And when we engage in sex because we want it, regardless of the fact whether the other person wants it, it becomes theft as well. So these three previous yamas are very easily and almost always violated where it comes to sexual relationships. But again, the ancient yogis, they figured out that if we deal with sexuality in a very sensible way, it can actually lead to spirituality. But to do so, we must not violate non-violence, non-lying, and non-stealing. What does this mean in practical terms? A relationship must always be consensual. It must be out of love, not because of a raw desire for sex. There must be consent from both sides. There must be love between the two, an attraction that very naturally leads to a wish to be intimate with each other. That is the difference between sex and romanticism. There is a huge difference between having sex because of the desire, which always leads to unhappiness, conflict, regret, or sex out of love, which elevates your spirit, which leads to happiness. It leads to the melting together of two souls that love each other. And that is something that we need to pursue. What is wrong about the demand from religious circles to vow celibacy is that it asks from you to deny an essential instinct. Sexuality is one of the strongest instincts that human beings possess. If you deny that, you will end up in psychological trouble. You cannot deny such a strong urge what we can do, and that is what Brahmacharya is about, is to try to control it and let it become a spiritual engagement in which both partners elevate their spirit, grow, develop, and just want to be together. Without violence, without manipulation, lying, without taking what is not allowed to have. If you look at what happened in the past 25, 30 years, is there have been many scandals in the Catholic Church about abuse, sexual abuse. Why does this happen? It happens by people who are forced not to have sex. They get frustrated. They can't control. And it's not only happening in the Catholic Church. That is the one that has been in the news a lot, time and time again. Still, it happens everywhere. Sexual abuse happens in the office. It happens at home, in family. It happens in spiritual circles. People who should know better, spiritual leaders, who are supposed to have their energy in the crown chakra, they abuse their authority to manipulate people. There is a Netflix series about some cult in Korea, several cults. I watched that, I forgot what it is called. I forgot the title of the documentary. There are like 6 episodes or so. And what starts with a good intention ends up with manipulating, controlling people, and sexual abuse. And that always leads to damaging people. People become damaged for life because of that. And especially spiritual people should know better. Because as a spiritual leader, all you want is other people to benefit, to grow, to be happy, to liberate themselves. What happens with spiritual leaders is they don't practice anymore. Or maybe they've never practiced before, ever. But you see reputed spiritual leaders who started with years of study and practice, and then later in life they end up abusing their followers. Now, when your energy is in the crown chakra, abuse is impossible. That is just simply not possible because you're too sensitive and too conscious. You're conscious of your desires. Of course you are. You will never be able to violate those principles. But as long as you practice, your energy will be on higher levels of consciousness. But no matter how many years you have practiced, if you stop practicing, and most older people do, most older spiritual leaders stop practicing, the energy drops down. And although they have their development, but if their energy is down, they will be more controlled by their emotions and desires, including sexuality. And that is when the abuse starts. My opinion, many older and advanced spiritual people, yogis, but everywhere in spirituality, they will say, I have done this for 20 years or for 30 years. I don't need it anymore. I have developed enough. My opinion is that's not true. If you want to maintain your condition, you have to keep practicing. It's simply a matter of science. You practice, energy is on higher levels of your consciousness, the crown chakra. And as long as energy is there, you simply cannot violate the universal laws without harming yourself considerably. So it's simply out of the question. But the moment that you stop maintenance, practice, whether that is meditation or asana or prayer, whatever practice your community is doing, the moment that you stop practicing, energy drops. And although you have some level of higher consciousness, your emotions and desires simply become stronger and out of control, obviously. So on a personal level, just keep in mind that relationships, try to pursue a level of purity in relationships. Try to be aware of your desires, try to be aware of how you want to pursue them, and more importantly, be patient. You will sooner or later cross paths with somebody where there is a spark. And when there is a spark, there is maybe the potential for a connection, and then you can slowly start to develop something that may at some point develop into a sexual relationship. But if sex is the first objective, it always leads to the violation of the principles. It always leads to trouble. It always leads to conflict. So it's a sensitive subject to talk about, but it's everywhere. It's everywhere in society, in every culture, in every continent of this world. It's everywhere. And the modern media, social media, and the whole popular culture is more and more sexualized. It's more and more difficult actually to avoid being subject to it or being a victim of it. So it's something to consider. Of course, I have been doing not just yoga, but I've been on the path of consciousness and self-care and through yoga for more than 40 years. And for me, if something doesn't feel right, I will always stay away from it, regardless. Even though I have a desire to be with somebody or to have sex or other things, money, whatever, if there's the slightest feeling that it is not right, I will avoid it. But that means also that you have to be really patient. Sooner or later you will get what you want, but if you're patient, you will get it without complications, without conflicts, without violence, lies, and stealing. And to approach this in a constructive way, during the time that I'm alone, wanting to be with somebody who loves me and that I can love, instead of pursuing a partner or something or a girlfriend, I just focus on daily events, self-care. Because I know in those moments that when you, for example, you were in a relationship, the relationship ended, you need time to grow and develop. Because the relationships in itself are very spiritual. Because they provide us with very valuable lessons in life. And they give us, relationships are like mirrors. It shows us who we really are. It teaches us many valuable lessons about ourselves. But if you don't take time for yourself, time for self-care, reflection, you never learn those lessons. So when a relationship has ended, it is good to stay alone for a while, for a couple of years even. The last time I was alone for 7 years. And it just allowed me to be ready for the next step. So We need to be patient and allow things to develop naturally. The universe will take care of everything. When it's time, when you are ready, somebody will cross your path and it will feel very natural and very spontaneous. And there are no complications whatsoever. Of course, that is the life of a yogi, but that is, I think, something we should all pursue. And in that way, love and sex become something wonderful. Look around you, and maybe you've experienced it yourself also in a previous relationship or in a current relationship. There's always so much tension surrounding sexuality. So much dishonesty surrounding sexuality. Pressure, manipulation. And it doesn't feel right. And if it doesn't feel right, it isn't right. I like especially the second paragraph on page 1. Brahmacharya means to elevate your attention to higher spiritual values, to purify your sexuality from violence, lies, and dishonesty, theft. Basically, it means to elevate sexuality from the instinctual level to a higher, more divine level. You know, there is a book. It's part of yoga, basically. You have the basic yoga books, but there are also yoga books about Ayurveda, which is ancient healthcare. There are books about astrology, about the universe, the stars, and what have you. There's also a book about love. It's called the Kama Sutra. Now, when we talk about the Kama Sutra, people who know the book, suddenly they smile and their eyes become naughty. But the original Kama Sutra has no illustrations, no pictures. And it's a thick book that makes relationships into an art. And of course, there is sex involved because sex is part of relationships. But the book is not about sex, it's about energy and how to use relationships, including sex, in the same way that we do with our yoga practice. So that energy leads to higher levels of consciousness. But when you practice yoga, you do it on your own. But the philosophy of the Kama Sutra means the book on desire. Kama is desire. Sutra is a book or a holy book. Versus like the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali, there's the Kama Sutra about desire. It's a science of desire. Very detailed how you can come to that unity together, two different souls coming together, becoming one and elevating each other in the process. It's an art. If you follow your feeling, you don't need the book. Just follow your feeling. Something doesn't feel right, just refuse. But if something feels good, pursue it. And most of all, in all of this, just be patient. Sooner or later, you will come across the right person, when the time is right. If you're not patient, you just set yourself up for a lot of misery and conflict, unhappiness. If I look around the people that I know, many people are in relation. You know, I was alone. I was single for 7 years. All my friends are in relationships. You know what they told me? Most of them told me, I envy you for being alone. What that means is they are not happy in their relationship. I told them on my turn, Well, you can easily say that. You are in a relationship. I envy you for being in a relationship. Because all I want is to be with somebody who wants to share their life with me. Interesting, no? But it shows that there is a lot of friction in most relationships. And a big part of this is related to sexuality. So approach it in a sensible way and you can create the ideal situation. But you can't do that alone. Your partner has to be on the same page with you. And it will take some time before you find that ideal partner. But sooner or later you will come across. And until then, just keep focusing on yourself. Keep focusing on your own life, your family life, your work, your self-development, with yoga, with studies, with whatever it is that you are engaged in. But for the time being, just focus on those things and allow the universe, Brahma, to put things in place to create the situation where you are ready to meet another soul that connects with you. I know it's not easy to live like that, but when you follow your feeling more and more, you will feel that that is the correct approach. Questions about Brahmacharya? All right. Let's have a short break.